What's up, friends? Welcome to SPDM TV. My name is Mike, part of the SPDM crew, and I watch a lot of TV. We talk about various TV topics, reviews, a general appreciation of TV past and new. You can follow me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and serialized at MLHelty2452 to see what all I'm watching. This week, we're going to be talking about Severance. It's been about a couple weeks since the season 2 finale aired. It is Apple TV Plus's sci-fi workplace prestige TV show, I would say, especially in a landscape right now where television doesn't really have a whole lot of prestige TV, which it's interesting to see its place in that. So joining me today to talk about this, he came back for more. He came back to talk about Severance, and he's one of the co-hosts of the Movie Smash podcast. I've got Chris Roberts back here. Chris, welcome back. You decided to come back. How's it going?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Chris Roberts, one of the co-hosts of the Movie Smash podcast, where we discuss movies based on comic books or graphic novels. I'm talking to you now from my basement studio, the bunker studio, I guess. It is really cold down here, but nonetheless, I'm here joining you to talk about Severance.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to this because I've had a lot of time to kind of think introspectively about what I thought about season 2 because there's a lot of different feelings that I have about it and a lot of different things that I'm really excited to talk about. But before we get to season 2, let's set the table a little bit and let's talk really quick about season 1 and not talking about like a recap. I'm wondering because you mentioned before we started recording that you didn't watch season 1 back when it premiered almost over 3 years ago now. So when did you get into season 1 of Severance?
Yeah, so it's funny thing was I actually, this is on Apple TV, it's exclusive to Apple TV, and I did not have Apple TV till sometime last year, and I actually got it to watch a show For All Mankind. Phenomenal show, love to talk about that
Love that
sometime
show.
too.
Yeah.
But I had not seen it before, so that was coming out. I wanted to watch that because I feel like it's a prequel to the show The Expanse. For those who've seen that show,
Love The
and
Expanse.
and so I started watching that, and then all of a sudden I'm done. I'm all caught up, and I'm looking around saying like, well, do I cancel my Apple TV or subscription, or do I find something else? And it kept suggesting Severance in the list. So I'd heard of it. I didn't know what it was, and I'd also heard of the show. There's another show that starts with the letter S that was pretty famous around the same time, and I was like, maybe it's that. I had no idea what the concept of the show was, and Apple TV is famous for its sci-fi.
Mm.
But things at that time, I did not know that. All I knew was I was there for one show and one show only, and I had a free subscription for the next 2 months. I was going to milk it for all it was worth. Started that show up, and honestly, after the second episode, I kind of fell in love with the show. But when I binged through the first season of it, the new season was only coming out a month later.
Yep.
I did not have this wait time. I hadn't even heard that there was this long wait between seasons that I'm only now just hearing about.
Yeah, that so I reviewed Severance season 1 for one of the websites I wrote for at the time, and I loved season 1. I thought that it was super innovative. I thought Apple was the right studio to shepherd a show like this through because they're taking chances on things that other networks and other streamers are not right now. And for this is sci-fi, very heavy sci-fi, very heady sci-fi through and through. This is going to make you think. There's not a whole lot of action or anything like that. It sometimes waffles between it's got some funny moments, but it's got some really heavy moments, and it's got some really weird moments that there's a couple things that happen in season 1 that are like, what is happening right now? I don't understand this. Like, who knew that a group of people dressed up as goats dancing for somebody would be something that we'd get to see in Severance season 1? Yet here we are. And the gap between season 1 and season 2, it's been 3 years since that. And granted, during that time, we were still on the tail end of COVID. So that was still a thing. The writer strikes pushed everything out. And then the other part was there were some creative differences that caused delays. And that to me, that was a big concern for me because I trust Ben Stiller and the direction that he was looking to take the show. I trust a lot of the other creative people, but there was just some shuffling of the deck in terms of individuals who were working on the show and also they had a storyline in mind and then they kind of shifted in a different direction. And I'd be curious to kind of get some behind the scenes notes on that about what caused them to do that. Maybe they couldn't figure out where to go from there, but it's interesting to me that throughout the course of this, there were some creative differences behind the scenes that caused delays as well. And you and I have been podcasting about movies. Like, this is true for both movies and TV shows. When there's creative differences, that usually doesn't bode well.
Yeah, because basically they've separated on their vision. When
Hmm.
that typically happens means that means one of the two main creators has said our original plan does not work,
Hmm.
or there's a problem with it, and either A, I didn't voice that problem early on, or
Right.
B, I'm now only realizing that. And then the question is, so do we mainly focus on the original vision, or do we go this new path? And one of the issues I had at the end of Severance season one, by the way, the show I was thinking of before, S Succession, very different show.
Very, very different show. That's
So
right.
I was truly surprised when I started watching Severance that it was not Succession. But nonetheless, is that at the end of season one, like I said, I didn't have this 3 year gap that you had. But I was actually thinking to myself, like, is this going to be like another Lost, where they put together this premise,
Yeah.
but where's the story truly going to go? Because it went from like, okay, the neat technology, sci-fi concept of severing their minds into two places, and then it gets weird. And then
Hmm.
shows that tend to get weird with no path often get derailed because they start thinking to themselves like, I just want to throw this weird thing in there to make people say, what's in the mystery box? And I hate mystery boxes. I like mysteries. I don't like mystery boxes. And I was a little worried we were going to go down that path. And we'll get to season two in a little bit and what that means. But it was a little worrisome at the end of that point, which is why I was glad that season two is right around the corner for me. So I didn't have to think to myself or even forget about the show. Because 3 hour span, I can imagine there being a drop off in ratings or sorry, viewers,
Hmm.
because that you forget about shows and then you go find Succession.
Well, you go find Succession, you go find a zillion other things,
Mm-hmm.
and it just this show like doesn't lend itself exactly to a lot of hardcore people wanting to rewatch this consistently. Like, I only had rewatched it once, and that was a couple weeks before season two had come out because I, quite frankly, I had forgotten a lot of what had happened. And 3 years in between shows is a giant gap. And for season one of Severance, they still have a very large fan base. It's not Game of Thrones, though. People aren't going to stick around because Severance was not part of like the national conversation like a Game of Thrones or a Breaking Bad was. People weren't like they were looking forward to it, but they weren't it wasn't appointment television. And also to your point, it's on Apple TV Plus. Like a lot of people, unless you have an iPhone, they don't actively subscribe to Apple TV Plus unless they're in love with a lot of their content. I am one of those people who am in love with their content. And even now, I'm like, how much more is left that I can watch on Apple TV Plus before eventually I have to realize I'm not sure I can sustain this without eventually having to give something up, which it's getting to that point, but right now Apple TV Plus is still putting out some really good content. So we'll just have to wait and see about that.
Yeah, the people I know, a lot of them, Apple TV is one of the first ones they cut when they had to make that decision of which services because all the prices are going up. And no, Disney Plus is weirdly one of the last ones because you've got kids. I've got kids, and like it's a great way to sort of say, here, go watch a Disney movie. So that's one of the
Mhm.
last ones you cut. Netflix, it's got a good library to it, but Apple Plus is a hyper focused sci-fi, hard sci-fi specifically,
Mhm.
not like a light sci-fi like Paramount would be,
Yeah.
but more of a hardcore sci-fi. Like it's got like Foundation on there as well. And like if you're not into that a thinking person's sci-fi,
Mhm.
Apple TV is a hard place to go to.
Right. Well, especially considering that most shows on Apple TV Plus don't last that long. So right now, for in the sci-fi genre, shows that are still happening right now, Foundation, I think, is still happening. Silo is still out there.
Yep.
Um, Severance is still out there. And then, like, I think For All Mankind is, I think they're done, or at least they've got
I
maybe
think they
like
got
one
I,
more
I
in
think they
them.
have one more left in them.
And for All Mankind, that was there from the beginning for Apple TV Plus, and it's still sticking around, even though a lot of the other shows they're done. Like they're the Jason Momoa one where everybody's blind. I think it's called C. That one was pretty good until it got weird. And then I'm so glad you brought up Lost because I've got so many complicated thoughts about that. So I'm looking forward to that. And plus the other thing too, I'm curious for you, binging season one, did you binge it all in like one or two sittings, or can you imagine what it would be like to potentially have to wait another week for some of these episodes?
Well, the way my work schedule goes, I've your listeners may or may not know, but I actually run a furniture company as well. We build nerdy furniture. One of the founders of Off Panel Creations, and we build, board game tables to comic book cabinets, that kind of stuff. But the reason I bring that up is that that's a long schedule. Plus, you have Movie Smash and dealing with the editing of that, managing that. So, and I've got three kids between middle school to high school. So the time for me to watch a television show is when they go to bed. And
Yep.
I can get about 15 minutes in before I'm passing out. So I watch this show in between 15 to 30-minute increments. So it took me a while to binge that show. So binging for me just means that as soon as the one episode's done, I can go right into the next one. It does not necessarily mean I'm going to sit there and watch 8 episodes back to back because there are some shows like I'm watching Silicon Valley. I've never seen it. It's funny. I'm on season 3 right now, but I'm watching that while I'm building furniture, and I can put that on the background, have a good laugh, and I don't have to necessarily watch the show actively. This is Severance. You must watch a show actively. You have to sit there and pay attention because there's a lot of things in the background that are very important to the story or future episodes. So because that, it means it falls into the time I can pay attention time slot, which is between about 10 to 10:15
Yeah.
p.m. And then that's what I get. So it still took me months to get through season one. But it did not, but so I would love to say I watched it over a weekend or something. Not at all. It took me several weeks. But if for must watch TV for me, it's no every night at 10 o'clock, boom, it's on the TV while I'm getting ready.
I empathize with you on so many different levels with that because the majority of the TV watching time that I do get is late at night. And there are some shows that, yes, I cannot multitask while watching it. This was one I found out the hard way that even with a dub, Squid Game is not one of them because I found out really quick. This dub is horrendous. So I needed to go back and I needed to rewatch it to hear some of the proper context, the way that the actors are actually talking to that made sense a little bit more. But I found out the hard way that there are a lot of shows out there that I cannot multitask and watch and hope to get a similar experience.
Yeah. I watch a lot of Swedish television as well, or Swedish movies, so I have to watch that with the subtitles on because
Mhm.
it is a dub, but the dub is never as good, just because there's some nuance in there. So I same thing with that. Like I can't. It falls in that slot of things I must pay attention to for whatever
Mhm.
reason.
Yeah. So like a perfect show that you're talking about, for me at least, that a show that I could put on in the background while I'm editing something or while I'm, writing episode descriptions or trying to network and trying to find guests. Cobra Kai was the perfect show for that. I don't need to pay attention that much to Cobra Kai because if something cool happens, I will sit like I will look at the TV, which is to my left right now. The audience can't see it, but I can at least watch it and pay attention while I'm doing this. And if something cool happens, I can at least, look over and see that it's fun. Plus, also, it's it's something where if karate is not happening, all they're doing is just talking about stuff. And if it's comedy, then cool. Then I'll laugh. And that's really about it. So watching this week to week was agonizing for me because well, okay, agonizing is a bit of a strong word because there were
Mhm.
some episodes where I was like, okay, this didn't do a whole lot for me, but the gaps between the last like 4 episodes is when this whole week to week model started to bother me a little bit, even though I fully support. I still support the week to week model when it comes to television show release because that way it kind of continues to be in the
Zeitgeist.
mindset, yeah, the mindset of people. I think a show that's doing that really well right now is The Pit. The Pit is doing that really well because it releases at 9 p.m. Like it feels like a primetime show, not like a show that you would have to wait until midnight or like the day after to actually watch it and then risk potential spoilers on the internet as well. So it's watching this week to week was a little frustrating at times, but I was a little frustrated watching the first couple seasons of Lost week to week, and I still stuck with it because I was really intrigued about what was happening. Now,
Yeah, well,
since
the week to week model used to be basically the standard TV model back in the day before streaming was the thing.
yeah,
When Netflix really sort of blew that model up, and now it's funny that we've gone full circle. We're coming back to it again, and it's just and also my cable bill, not cable bill, my internet bill plus my services are probably exceeding my old cable bill at this
yep,
point. But the you brought up you brought the like things I can watch in the background while doing something else. Netflix actually coined the term a second screen movie or a
yes,
small screen movie, and a recent release came out, Electric State, which is
mhm,
a comic book movie. We have not reviewed it yet. It's based on a graphic novel, so we will at some point. But I did watch it in anticipation of it coming out because it was a beautiful book.
mhm,
That movie was designed to be put on the background while you're doing something else,
mm,
which is depressing.
yeah,
But that is the way a lot of these movies are going these days, where actually they'll state out what they're doing, or there's more talking involved, and there's less something happening, or you got to figure something out. They're literally just telling you what's happening on the screen, so that way you don't miss it because you're editing a file somewhere or you're
right.
checking an email or something.
And dare I say that shows and movies like that, there's I think at minimum maybe just a stigma around them that you think that they're not going to be potentially as good because you don't have to pay attention as much to them. And that's sad because it feels like certain studios they're not putting their best foot forward when it comes to some of these shows. And I think at the end of the day also it just feels like there are certain shows that I could put on in the background, but those are shows that I've seen frequently, like old school, like first 10 seasons of The Simpsons. That's my go-to one where if I cannot think of anything to watch, which is difficult because there's so much TV out there right now that it's really hard for me to be like, I can't choose. So I'm just gonna watch an episode of The Simpsons and just kind of keep that on in the background. But if it's something new, I don't know. There's sometimes for me that there are TV shows like that where I could watch it in like 2 to 3 sittings. I'll be okay and I can multitask with it and I could still have fun with it. I could still enjoy it. Would I call it prestige TV? No, but also I'm not always looking to watch prestige TV. I still need to be entertained. So there is still a place for shows like that that need to be consumed in some fashion.
And that's exactly what it is, consumable entertainments.
Mhm,
Essentially, I don't want to use the word content, but essentially something you can watch once, you enjoyed it. We used to call them, popcorn movies.
mhm.
You watch it in the summertime, blockbusters, and then you never have to see it again.
Yeah.
It was the one and done's. It's like Piranha 3. Hilarious, never need to see it again.
Mhm.
For me, my go-to right now is always the TV show called Inside Job. It's if you've heard of it, it's on Netflix. It's all jokes all the time. It's about conspiracy theories, but because I've watched it, or sorry, rather listened to it so many times while I'm building something else, that I can play that in the background and still enjoy the show and not have to watch it because there are some sight gags, but once you've seen the sight gag once, you don't need to see it again.
Right.
But Netflix is the one who really specializes in this sort of consumable media
Mhm.
versus, like I said, Apple TV is going the polar direction where they're saying we're going to build sort of smart prestige television that is awe-inspiring at times, or where you've got to actually think through it. But it also loses some audience because you sort of mentioned that Severance, the week to week was killing you, and it's a slow burn television show. There is no like this happens and all of a sudden I'm gonna get resolution by the end of the 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever it is. It is a very slow burn, which is why my wife stopped watching it. She 3 episodes in, she's like, I can't handle it. Like this is just too slow. Um,
That is completely fair. I cannot blame anyone who thinks that the show is a little bit on the slow side. So,
but
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was saying, so yes, so you want to jump into season two?
Yeah, let's do that. So, we will start spoiler free for season two. Um, season two takes place like almost, it feels like almost immediately after the aftermath of the season one finale. So let's keep it spoiler free. So general thoughts, Chris, what did you think of Severance season two?
So I'd say if you look at it compared to season one really felt like they're building the mystery, building like this what seems like a benign idea of severing my personality where I go one part goes to work, one day has all the fun. I want to be the one that has all the fun, right?
Mhm.
It's a buddy of mine actually referred to it as like I would love to sever myself and have him go be the gym bro. And I can
Yes.
enjoy the workouts and, because stuff over there. And the initial thought was that makes some sense. Then all of a sudden you realize there's some ethical quandaries that develops, which is all teased out in season one. But that mystery's been built. Season two, without spoiling anything, is really the peeling of the first layer of the onion. Sort of get at the core of what is this all really about? Is there some secret end game? Is this benign as they put out there to be? But season one really is sort of like, let's dig a little deeper rather than building up the mystery anymore. They're not building it anymore at this point. They're digging, looking for solutions. But with every question, with every answer comes two more questions.
Hmm.
But it feels very cohesive in that, unlike Lost, where now there's now there's the was it the latch, the bunker, we got to find our way into there, the hatch,
Hmm.
or what do these symbols mean, or what's the umbrella, or what. It's like they felt like they were throwing those in there because like we now need our next mystery.
Hmm.
This doesn't feel like that. This feels like every answer you're getting makes sense. It feels nice and like it. You look at it and say, I may not have thought that was the right answer, but I can see why that is the right answer.
Mm.
And we'll get into some of those questions later on. But then of course with that comes additional questions, which leads me to season three. So like it's the peeling of the mystery versus the building of the mystery when you compare those two seasons together.
That's a good way of putting it. And for people who have been waiting for the show, or even just anybody who considers themselves a fan of the show, that peeling back of the layers and you're getting two questions for every question that's answered, that's going to be the core. That's, I suppose, the best way to put that. That's going to be the core thing that causes people to wonder how much more of this show can I take? Because if this show is, and I get it, that is that is part of the joy of watching television, is that as soon as you solve something, something else has to come up to, in a way, take its place. And there is a lot of things being juggled right now, and these are all there's no easy solutions here. And on one end, that's what I love about this show, is that there are a lot of, as you mentioned before, ethical quandaries and moral dilemmas. And this is a thinky show. Like, this is a show that's going to really make you think about the way things are in this universe. On another end, that's also kind of a turnoff, because at some point you got to start to wonder, what is the end game with this? And that is kind of where I'm at right now. I am wondering, where is this all ultimately going to lead? Because if let's just put it this way, if we're at the end of season three or season four and we find out that everybody secretly has been severed at some point or another, I'm going to be really pissed. But I don't think that's where this show is going. And now I am just wondering, when are we going to get more answers
I'm
about
not
that?
saying it was aliens, but it was aliens.
Yeah, it's possible. You never know. I don't
Well, I
know.
I think one thing the show does very good is that it is an alternate world than our own. This does
Mhm.
not take place within our world. And not just because it's the severance technology, but there are a lot of fundamental differences about the history of the United States that take place in the show that are different than ours, that sets us up.
Mhm.
Why is that important? What that also means that because it is grounding the show within a sort of a reality to it. So there's I joke about aliens, but the problem is that there's no notes about aliens. There's no hint that aliens can even exist. So they would not go there before that. Every answer we've gotten is grounded in the same reality we had before coming up to the show.
Mhm.
Now, the one thing I do, and I to sort of ease somebody's mind about the show, and I could be mistaken about this. I remember, I thought I heard Ben Stiller talking about that. Their plan is only for 4 seasons. That
I
is their
had heard
plan.
that. I had heard
And
that as well.
any show where I hear they say our plan is for X number of seasons, I feel good about, because that means there's a plan. It means they're thinking about it on season one where they want to get to. It's always the one where like they just every season it's like the mystery unfolds further, but there's more, like Lost. Lost, there was no end game with that thing. I think they even changed gears where they were trying to go with it at some point.
It,
Be, so
yeah,
it's so
yeah.
and that's an issue you had, because was J.D. Abrams even said like he didn't know what the answer to the mystery box was. He just created the mystery box, like, what is this all about? And then he left the show. And that creates a problem. If Ben Stiller were to leave tomorrow, someone else were to take over the show, they could literally look at his notes and say, this is where they were going to go. They may not agree with it. They could change course, but that means there's a premise, a plan, and a set of operations they're going to go through to get to where they want to get to. So the idea for me is that you can take me along the greatest journey in the world, but if I know there's an end point at 4 seasons, I'll enjoy it even more because
Mhm.
I know you're not just you're not just dragging me along wherever you think is funny or interesting or whatever. That they know they've got to wrap this all up. All those one answer, two questions, they got to get from here to there in only 2 more seasons. So, which means this should feel, if done properly, it is the peak of the mysteries, and now we should be going forward, getting more answers, and we get questions because now we're coming to the last 2 seasons.
And if that is the case, and I think I read something very similar, I'm in full 100% agreement with you, is that they there's a plan in place, and even if they did have some creative differences about where the plan goes, the fact that they have mapped this out gives me a lot of confidence about that. So, for example, Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is another show that they thought that it was going to be 3 seasons, and then they got to the story that they wanted to tell. I'm not exactly sure season three ended the way that they wanted it to, but now they're going back and they're like, oh, we got to renew this because Apple probably needs it in its arsenal because it's one of their most popular shows. It's also one of their best shows in Apple's defense, but that show slowly but surely became, I'm not sure this show knows what it's doing right now or what even remembers what it's supposed to be in the first place. And that's where we're running into problems. And with Severance, there's some things about this season that I loved. And there's some things from season one that the show remains consistent on. Like the cinematography and the music are still outstanding. It's still super eerie. Just the set design, everything like that is good. There are certain characters because this cast of characters, even though we don't get a whole lot of additional cast, given everything that happens this season, the cast is effectively doubled in a lot of ways. And that also kind of leads to some of the questions that I have about this whole innie versus outie persona that is pretty much the thing that they are talking about this season about what does it mean? Who is the real person? Is it the innie persona or is it the outer persona? And if you don't know who the real person is, then the correct answer is neither of them are the real person because they are two very distinct personalities now and they
And I
have
guess
different experiences.
I've got some theories around that, but we'll say that for the spoiler part because that really ties into those last couple episodes.
Let's just go ahead and rip the band-aid
Mhm.
off. Let's go with spoiler talk right now. So if you have not seen Severance season two or don't feel like being spoiled about it, first of all, the finale aired a couple weeks ago. So come on, get with it because there's a lot of great TV on right now. There's almost too much great TV on right now. And you couple that with, boy, the movie season this year has been kind of a little bit on the lackluster side. So right now TV is definitely killing it for entertainment. So this is your final warning as I continue to tap dance around this. And now we're in official spoiler territory. So Chris, I would love to hear your theories kind of based on those last couple episodes and kind of set the table as to what kind of brought about this theory and kind of what plot point you want to talk about first.
So I know we'll get into various characters, that kind of thing, but just to sort of, I think we should start on the macro level, start
Mhm.
big picture, and then we can start digging deep on the various levels of things. But like I remember, I watched season one straight on through, right?
Mhm.
So I didn't have to wait about it, I had to think about it. And then season two, I watched every single week. Like it came out like, what was it, Friday mornings?
Mhm.
Like I work for myself, so I build my own schedule, but literally 7:30 in the morning, I drop the kids off at the school. I'm sitting down watching Severance. Like that
Mhm.
was my life every Friday morning for the past few weeks.
Yeah.
Um, so the reason I bring it up, so really what it feels like is there is a difference between the innies personality and the outies. That's true. We know that there's a difference. But one of the things that it feels like is that the whole point of the show is to remove trauma or pain. That's what they're talking about. That's at least the premise that's been presented to us.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of these people, like let's use Mark as an example. The innie Mark up until recently, like the original Mark we saw, Mark S, was essentially Mark Scout without his trauma. That's
Hmm.
who he was. A freer spirit. He was jovial. He was happy. He wasn't like, a party guy, but he's effectively the same person without the trauma.
Hmm.
And that's what we're saying too. So like you get someone like who's the I forgot, I can't always forget his name. The guy who's super competitive in the show. His name is escaping me. He has a
Is
family, two
Zach.
kids.
Zach.
Zach. So in the show, Zach is super competitive. He was always presented to us that he's that one employee that everyone has in their group who's getting all the awards all the time, and he's super competitive about it. The finger traps are super important to him. Okay, I'm gonna out myself a little bit. That I used to be a financial advisor 20 odd years ago. I ran a practice, sold it off years ago. But the reason I bring that up is there is an earlier part of it where you probably see movies where people pick up the phone and make phone calls trying to sell certain stocks, that kind of thing. I was one of those guys in a good way, not the bad ones. This is not
Hmm.
Boiler Room.
Oh, nice.
But it was not that. So, but anyway, I was number one in my firm for number of trades during those competitive periods, and number two for volume. Sorry, number two for trades, one for volume during that time for one of these years. I had 8 different portfolios. Those little books you open up that zip up. I had 8 of those things. I had like 3 or 4 baseball caps. I had so many pens from these competitions. They sat in the back of my car. So when I met a new employee, I just give them one of those things. But it was a nice thing to say, hey, look at that stack of those awards I got. I was, so he is that person in the office, super competitive over the smallest things. If you can make a game out of it, he wants that gamification. Outside that world, he is full of, we don't know all his trauma. We don't know what's pushing him down to be this depressed guy who can't find work, or when he's on a job interview, he's talking himself down a lot. Essentially, the any version represents who he would be without that trauma, because they don't forget details. They know some things about the outside world, right? But the core personality is still there, which is the whole point of why Gemma is there. We'll get into that in a little bit, I guess,
Hmm.
is what they're trying to do with Gemma. But I think the basic core of Innies, the basic ones, those people are essentially their personality types removing the trauma. And that's why it comes out. That's why they quiz them every time they come in for the on the boardroom table, and they ask the question like, where were you born? I don't know where I was born. What name a U.S. state?
Hmm.
Right, and the name of U.S. state, because that's the only memory they have of those things. And I bet you that's where like she said, Helly said Delaware, right? I bet you she was born in Delaware, but she can't
It's.
remember why she was born in Delaware.
Hmm.
But anyway, that's my theory on sort of these personality types. Like they are the core personalities of who they are, but because they've been severed and they now have different lived experiences, they are now 2 separate personalities.
Hmm.
It's kind of like the fork in the road, right?
Yep.
There's a splitting point, the Severance, if you would, the titular name of the show. But it's at that point of Severance that they now have different lived experiences, but the removal of the trauma is what creates that second personality. So they're not just creating a fresh slate, which is the whole Gemma project, which we can save for another part of the discussion. That's what they're trying to do there, is create that fresh slate. Can they get there? Because all the Severance technology can do at this point, essentially remove that trauma, that pain, as much as they can. Now, some of it still bleeds through, right?
Hmm.
Which we've learned as well from the show. But that's the way they create that second personality. Who would you be without the stresses of your life holding you back, or all the mistakes you've made, or the trauma you had in your life, like when you lost a loved one? If those were out of your life, what would your personality be like?
So that's a really strong theory. And the only thing that's kind of holding me back from that is Helly. And I'm wondering if Helly goes in because for all intents and purposes, Helen, or Helena, as she's known on the outside, she's an Egan. So she's part of the infrastructure of this company. We still don't know exactly why she chose to be part of the severed floor, though. And that's one of those questions that, unless you caught onto something, I'm still kind of wondering about that. But I am also wondering if she is put there as kind of a way to kind of like test the theory out from a different perspective, because for all intents and purposes, you're right. Everyone, so Irving, Dylan, I miss
Oh, it's Dylan. You're
it's
right.
Dylan because Zach Cherry is the guy's real name,
Yeah.
but Dylan and Mark all have had something in their lives that causes them to think, I need to, I would really like this uh as a way to potentially escape what's going on in my real life. Helly's the only one. where what in her life we've yet to discover what in her life has caused her to think that I need to undergo this procedure and be part of this ecosystem. But the other thing too is that Helly also is the other one who she's had a bit of a rough experience down there because in that first season she does attempt to take her life, which very that was a critical moment for me in season one because that is something that, boy, she hated it down there so much, or she was struggling with it so much down there that she felt the need that she felt the desire that she wanted to end her own life. That is something that I'm still wondering if they're ever going to really like address that again, or if that's something, or if that is kind of what we were talking about before. Is that a trend that they see with certain people, that if they don't have that particular trauma, that they'll create the trauma somewhere on the severed floor, and that's going to be something that they evaluate from that point forward? I don't know yet, but otherwise, everything else about what your theory is solid.
Well, I gotta say the heli actually reinforces the theory,
Hmm.
and the reason why is this is because actually episode 9 of last season, she's there at the very end. She's sitting at the computer by herself, and Egan walks in, and he says to her, "You remind me more of Kier when you were younger." So because what's happened is whatever that trauma was, which we haven't gotten to, and I've got a theory as why she's down there. Well, we got not theory. We can talk about why she's down there, but the because whatever the trauma or the weight of her life outside that, which could really just merely be being the successor to Egan, like
That's
that
pretty
carries
big.
some weight.
That's
That's
pretty big.
big.
Yeah.
And once that's removed, she's more like the original Kier. And
Yeah.
her father recognizes that you, without this trauma that I have placed upon you, you are more like Kier than you ever were. Like she's defiant. She's in your face. She's trying to make it happen. She was willing to kill herself than suffer the slings and arrows of what they're trying to put her through at this place. That is what Kier, supposedly according to all the doctrine that they put forward here, was like. And I think that's really sort of talks more to why the severance is really the removal of that trauma, and who would you be without it? And the trauma she has is just the trauma of growing up with this extra pressure of being the successor of this empire,
Hmm.
because she lives in the same house that he lives in, right? She was
Hmm.
in episode 10. She's swimming laps in that pool. She's eating an egg in front of her father in a very strange way.
Very, very
Very
strange way with like just elaborate and just beautiful cutlery and plates. Very specific, very specific on the one percenter thing. So
yeah.
yeah, I could see that.
And now, so I think so it speaks more to the trauma. Now, the reason why she's down there, we know from season 1 that it was a publicity stunt, according to them. There's more to it than that, I believe. I don't know what that reason is. There's a lot of theories out there, but I think a lot of it really does come down to is that now she's down there for whatever the reason she went down there for. Now, for all we know, maybe she does believe it's a publicity stunt. Like the outside world is not more trusting than the any world, right? They lie to you all the time outside there.
Hmm.
So she may have been lied to by Egan himself. We don't know that, but all
Yeah.
we know is that remove this weight of succession off her shoulders. She's still defiant. She's still strong. She's more sort of in your face than before because now the need for civility is gone,
Right.
right? Because having been, he wasn't exactly with a financial services firm, and believe me, at those levels, really, there is a decorum you're supposed to present yourself in. There is a level where you're supposed to carry yourself, but it is fake, right? It is basically a show you're putting on, and
Yeah.
you really do that. And the moment that show is gone, you get knifed in the back.
Yeah.
And for her, she's carrying that weight. Like you see how restrained she is during those board meetings. How
Oh yeah.
restrained she is when she's talking to, oh, her name escapes me. The person that used to be in charge of the severed floor.
Harmony
Harmony,
Cobell.
Harmony. So
Hmm.
when she's talking to her, she's very reserved, right? She's very controlled because she knows that's how she has to carry herself. So that's the expectation that's been put upon her. But like once that trauma of putting your life through that is removed, she becomes still defiant and strong, but now she's not held back.
Hmm.
If that makes any sense.
That does make sense. And this whole thing with the person, the person on the severed floor is who you were if you remove the trauma. If that macro level is kind of what this company is ultimately looking to do, because we still do not have a fully fleshed out answer about what Lumen does, or at least maybe the company as a whole, or just the severed floor project, if that's what they're looking to do. If they do keep it at that, and if that is it, I would be more than satisfied with that. If that is what they're looking to do, and there's not like some grain conspiracy to do something more with this for nefarious purposes. If they're genuinely looking to find a way to remove trauma from individuals and find a way to allow people to move on, or because trauma is a huge part of people's lives, and whether or not you think that is part of the experience or merely a speed bump in the road of this grand experience we call life, it still affects people one way or another. And if that's what they're looking to do, I am very fascinated to see how they continue to do that, because at the end of this season, because the big crux of the whole thing with Mark S, or Mark Scout, his outside life, is that at the end of season one, they discover that his wife is still out there. She's still alive. That is like the last thing, one of the last lines of season one. She's still alive, and that's something that is very curious and very explore or is explored a lot this season. And we do see a little bit, like we get some backstory on Mark and Gemma's relationship, which I'm curious, Chris, what did you think of that episode where we get to go back and see a little bit of their relationship?
Yeah, it felt natural. Like it felt like in movies and TV shows tend to try to over romanticize a relationship, try
Yes.
to make it more glossy than it actually is. Like you could tell that these people were growing close to one another. You know, he's making jokes here and there, and they're not the funniest jokes in the world, but she's chuckling at it. And then they show the trauma that they're going through, such as the miscarriage and taking apart the crib and all this. So it felt like a very natural relationship. Then no, then sort of like what I've seen in other TV shows and movies where it's sort of over the top and everything is sort of a grand romantic gesture. I didn't see any of that. Like this felt
Hmm.
like an actual lived relationship.
Hmm.
For those things. By the way, the actress who plays Gemma, the first place I remember seeing her was a show called Altered Carbon,
Mm, yeah.
right? Because and the thing is, I didn't recognize that until the end of season one. Like I kept seeing her, like, why does she look so familiar? She has very unique, unique features. She's a great actress, and but not until the end because I guess she's wearing a wig or she's dyeing her hair or something like that. In one of those two shows, I'm not sure which one she's doing that in, but yeah, I feel like the relationship between her and Mark felt very natural. Where the relationship between Mark and Helly seems very sort of brought on by shared experience, the shared trauma of being a ninny, the shared sort of, but it's also more naive relationship
Hmm.
between those two versus that of Gemma and Mark Scout.
Hmm.
Because they can fall back on their previous relationships and look upon what they've learned from those versus like think about the ending of the show when they're running through the hallways holding each other in their hands and they've got nowhere to go. Like where are they running?
Yeah.
There's, they're just running because that's what you do, I guess. Because they're following they're following the passion in that moment, which is a very different relation to that and Gemma. Like when he was escaping with Gemma, it was Mark S and Gemma at the time for those rare moments. Like you can see like they're thinking through like what do I have to do? Where do I have to get to? The end of this one, it's very naive. The way they're sort of just running and fleeing the hallway as the hallways are turning red and changing colors. The We keep going to this removing trauma thing. What's the big goal? I think it's more than removing trauma because the 25 versions of Gemma we see, the ultimate version, Cold Harbor, is where nothing breaks through, no emotions break through between who she was and who she is now, right? The severance of it, because she has to deconstruct that crib that she bought when they miscarried that child. So normally they would carry trauma with it. You experience that, and they put her through what would be a painful experience again, but she feels nothing. She's just deconstructing this crib. It means nothing to her.
Hmm.
And for those wondering, Cold Harbor is the name of the manufacturer of the crib.
Oh,
If you didn't know that.
I didn't. I didn't. Okay, good to know. I miss that. And therein lies the thing about the show. You got to pay attention because was Cold Harbor the was it on the crib
Yeah,
somewhere?
when he's building the crib, you can see the logo on the side of the crib when he's building it.
No
Yeah,
sh
it's
no
yeah.
shit. Okay. All
So,
right.
and the thing is, it's you're thinking to yourself like, is it a Cold Harbor where the Harmony goes to? Is cold because everything else I think in the show, those different packets are all named after actual places in the United States or in the world, but Cold Harbor is not. And it's because yeah, it's just named after the manufacturer of the crib she has to deconstruct
Mhm.
that was her lived trauma was the miscarriage. That was the worst experience that she and her husband had before she died.
But then as she is taking apart the crib,
Mm-hmm.
they are ecstatic about the results. The people who work at Lumen, including James Egan, I think is his name. He is
Yeah.
watching, he's seeing everything unfold, and even like the nurses and other people who are helping Gemma out, when they see Mark, they're like, the partner's here or the spouse is here. And they know that something's up because is love potentially the thing that is going to bring all this stuff back? Maybe. Like, we're still kind of unsure about how what Mark's role in all of this, or if it's not Mark, if it's just a specific emotion that it elicits. Perhaps a soulmate type of thing. I don't know.
Well,
To me, also, like, could this be a precursor to what they were doing in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind? Because is that where this ultimately leads? Like, I would love it if there was some connection there, but I highly doubt it. But if there was something there, what's like, okay, do we need to remove this person from your subconscious in order for you to get to this person where you're not going to feel that trauma again? I don't know.
I think this show takes a lot of, and I want to talk to you a little about Gemma again in a second, but I think this
Hmm.
show takes a lot of inspiration from Twilight Zone. In
Hmm.
fact, there are a lot of homages in this, and even straight up names of episodes pull from the Twilight Zone. So I think a lot of it pulls into that. And like you're talking about sort of Gemma and sort of what they're trying to do there. So you have the last one is she has no emotional connection to the previous Gemma, right? That's what they're trying to establish. They're trying to, and Harmony even said, if they succeed with Cold Harbor, Gemma is dead. Is I don't think it means Gemma has been killed. The personality of Gemma has been squashed so much because now they're just going to hold on to her in that new personality type
Hmm.
that they have wiped her slate clean. I think that's the ultimate goal they're trying to accomplish. Why they're doing it, many theories, but why they're actually doing, we don't know. And what that is that they're trying to find a way to completely remove the personality of all the traumas from that person and they have a clean slate. And I don't think it's for the ultra reason of like, you may have had a death in your family. Let's get rid of that pain so you don't have to worry about experiencing it. I don't think it's that. I think it's I want to make a version of you as a living biological machine and wipe out your personality so I can use it for something else. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's going to plant something in there or not. Now, what is the connection with Mark S? And I think what they're doing is like I said, I've been married for over 20 years at this point, and a lot of things I know a lot of the pains my wife has gone through, and she knows a lot of the pain I've been through. So when they're sitting in that macro refinements facility and they're pulling the trauma, the numbers, you notice it's always about how do the numbers feel to you, right? It's not these numbers equal a certain things. Really, they elicit a reaction, an emotion to it, right? And I think they're just the digital represent. Think like the Matrix
Hmm.
when you have what's his name, the guy that betrays him anyway. He's sitting there, look at the numbers, like I can
Cypher, yeah.
cipher it. Yeah, I can see the Matrix, but just the numbers. He's looking at the code. That's what they're doing. They're looking at the code of the mind, like Cipher, and they're plucking out of it where there's an emotion. And that emotion they're feeling, how do the numbers make you feel? Ooh, that's a scary packet.
Right.
That's a happy packet. But they're finding. They're not saying you find only the happy ones, find only the bad ones. They're saying find the ones that elicit emotions. They're pulling the code out of the person's brain. And I think that code is what creates the block within the chip. So they're not actually wiping the person's mind. They're just making so the severance chip itself that's planted between their hemispheres, that severs their brain, finds a way to block those emotions from them. So I pull. So they're saying. So he finds a code, whatever the 9 digits were. I don't know what they are. I'm not going to pretend like I know what they were. But
Right.
the 9 digits that pop on the screen, he like pulls it out because it could have been a happy one. I think they even said like, "Oh, I think this is a happy one," right? Pulls that out and he says that one goes in this box for the 4 tempers, right? And he goes, so now the machine knows I need to block that kind of code. And if I can block that code, so the more things, if they get to 100%, means they can block 100% of the personality because they've now found the core code for that person. So Mark is able to do it so well because he knows his wife so well. Now I think the macro people are doing it as well, the other macro refiners, but they don't know the person as well. If I see, and let's say you had a car accident in your past, right? Well, I've had a car accident in my past, so I can maybe locate the car accident trauma and help you refine that and remove that, right? But I haven't had, sort of any other sort of shared trauma you've had with your spouse, right? They would be the better person for refining that.
Mhm.
But anyway, that's how I kind of look at it. So I think the end game for them, or not necessarily the end game, the end game of this process is to make a clean slate human. Could it be because I want to train them to do something? Maybe they're amazing assassins. I don't know. Maybe Kier wants to plant his own brain into there. I don't know. And the things we'll learn as we go along. And I don't really want to speculate too much. But the point is, we now know the point of what they're trying to do. The main goal of this stage is to just make a clean slate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know I said a
And
lot.
no,
I ramble.
no, it's all good because there's just a lot going on in my brain right now, which is good because that's one of the things I love about the show is that there's so much to think about and there's so much to kind of decipher because if you take Helly aside and you look at the other three guys, so you've got Mark, which we've kind of talked about a little bit. We've talked a little bit about Dylan, and then there's Irving.
Mm-hmm.
And Irving he's a bit of an interesting character because we still haven't explored much of his backstory, or not too much at least, because all we know is that when he's outside of the severed floor, he's painting. He's really enjoys painting, and then he's got this whole thing that he has with Bert, which is the love that he found on the severed floor. And boy, what an awkward dinner that Bert, Irving, and Fields, John Noble here for a cup of coffee, having a conversation about is it cheating or is this a completely different person? Just a lot of heady philosophical conversations here. But then you have Bert, who you get a little bit of his role at Severance before he was demoted to the O&D department, that he was kind of a pseudo hitman for them. I don't know what that means yet, but I'm very curious to see
Well, he
what.
wasn't a hitman. He just drove people places and never asked questions.
Mm,
Which tells me you drove him a place to go get him killed. But
that's still something to very very interesting stuff there, though.
yeah, and this is his penance. Severance is his penance for his crimes because he believes he himself will go to hell, right?
Mhm.
And because he's a religious man,
Yeah.
and he believes any has a whole different soul than he has, and his any will earn enough good points and be a good enough person that he will go to heaven.
Mhm.
And then maybe there's a version of him in heaven that his spouse can enjoy, that can be with. I forget the actor's name is. He was a fantastic job in the show Fringe. If you haven't seen that show, go check it
Yeah.
out.
John Noble.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
He yeah, John Noble was great in Fringe, and another show where there's lots of alternate personalities, lots of multiversal things there. I'm and it's very interesting because this show, although it's not dealing with the multiverse, it is dealing with a lot of different aspects of people's personalities and alternate versions of themselves within the same place. And that's what I was saying before, where everybody's like the cast is effectively doubled because we're looking at like sometimes it can feel a little bit hard to determine which person are we talking to, is the innie or the outie. And then when they have that retreat at I want to get the
The
place right.
Orbo,
Woes follow or Woes hollow, which
Rose Hollow,
oh,
for the
that's
world's biggest waterfall.
right. Um, where they have a protocol in place where they because Irving figures out pretty quick that you're not that Helly is not Helly because Helly was never cruel. And boy, that must have stung a little bit because if Helly is somebody who is kind and who's somebody who's looking out for people, how must Helena feel? It's like, oh, I'm a cruel individual, but she's also an Egan, so she gets a shitload of money. So and she's the heir apparent. But that is how Irving discovers that Helly is not who she says that she is, and they have a procedure in place where they can just flip it back, or is this something specifically for Helly? I'm still a little unclear about that, but that to me is a little terrifying that they have something in place like that that causes people to be able to switch back and forth like that so quickly.
Well, I think it's the was it the Glasgow Protocol is what they called it,
I think so.
and that's where they can basically these are chips in people's brains, and what they've proven here is not the ding in the elevator that makes the switch happen. They can control when it's on and when it's off. It's like the after hours protocol they use at the end of season one.
Mhm,
And so, which means, which should be terrifying, is I mean, once you have this thing in your brain, they can turn you off.
mhm,
And what we've learned is that the moment you're turned off, be you in any or an outie, if they never turn you back on again, you are effectively dead.
mhm.
You don't come back from that. So even if you're an outie and they turn you off and the innie takes over your body, you're dead, which is what happens between Mark S and Mark Scout. They have this wonderful conversation where they're talking on a camcorder, and he does, I forgot the actor's name, he does a phenomenal job of portraying those two people having a discussion, going back and forth, where Scout is trying to convince Mark S to help him free Gemma. Now, Mark S wants to free the wife, right? Out of the goodness of his heart, not because of an emotional connection.
Mhm.
And but at the same time, he also realized that the moment Mark Scout gets Gemma out of the facility, he may never come back from this. And that's where he has his moral conundrum: is do I help this person who needs help? But at the same time, if I
At the
allow
expense of me.
and he
Yeah.
says to me, and I have no connection, I've only existed for the past year.
Mhm.
And one thing Mark Scout says, he's a child.
Child. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
that was not lost on me either. And that was strategically placed and great dialogue there. He's acting like a child. It's like, well, kind of kind of
and
is a little
he
bit.
is. And I have a teenage son, and I've had conversations not about freeing someone from a facility, but where at times you're like, you are not seeing the grander picture. You're
Mhm,
limiting your scope like a child does. And it said, but you at the same time, you got to understand. I would feel the same with Marquez. Is like, if this is my personality, and I know if you never turn me back on again, I disappear.
mhm,
Right? Like Irving. When Irving quits or gets fired, he's turned off. They
mhm.
have a funeral for him because he's not coming back.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things I think is not, I want to say lost on people, but that's really the cost of this. By creating a separate personality within the same body, the same frame, you have now created the conundrum of, if this show solves all the problems, they take down Lumen from the inside, it's all crushed and destroyed. Well, now what? Do we
Mhm.
wipe out half the people,
Yep.
or
That's
do we take alternate like divorced parents have alternate weekends?
mhm.
How do you resolve this? And that's where I'm kind of curious, because what's the process that Mark wants to undergo? He starts bringing the two personalities together. Reintegration.
Reintegration. Yeah.
Reintegration sounds like a solution, but effectively it just still destroys the NE, because Mark S, for being such a child, still fully understands you have more memories than I do, which means you will dominate the merger of our two memories together. And as you know, as you get older, you forget things, right? The moment
Mhm.
those memories are forgotten, Mark S is gone,
Yep.
because all you are at the end of the day are your memories. If you have no memory of who you are, you're not that person anymore. You're just a meat mech, for lack of a better phrase. Um,
Good way to put it. And that conversation that Mark has with himself, the actor is Adam Scott, who the camcorder conversation, that's the climax of this series, right? Just it's where we have this point where we're getting to the point of no return for for Mark specifically. I don't think we've reached that for a lot of the other characters yet, but for Mark specifically, this is the big decision that he has to make. And it is the whole, and this is where the whole philosophical conundrum does come into place about the innie versus outie persona, and where a lot of the dilemma comes
Mhm.
in is that you are effectively creating a second individual, a second personality. I kind of equate it to how, you mentioned like how your corporate life is different from your family life. It's kind of the same thing about your online life versus your real life. Who you are online is not the same as who you are in real life in a lot of ways. So, who's a real person at the end of the day? And the correct answer to that is there is no real person. They're two very distinct personalities that need to be reconciled somehow. And the whole thing with Mark going through the reintegration piece, and Mark S does not trust Mark. He makes it very clear because the crux of this conversation is like, why can't you just trust me? And Mark S says, I don't, because this is his life that's at stake. He doesn't have a whole lot that he has, but he has Helly. And that's the thing, that's the emotional response that he is giving to this whole situation where he's got Helly. And what you talked about before, they are just two people holding hands, just wandering aimlessly because where are they going to go at this point? Because as soon as they get on that elevator to get out of the severed floor, what what are they going to do? Like it's not like they can leave and just have their life back as it was before. They just can't. So I'm kind of curious if season three is going to dive into this a little bit more. Is there a time limit to how long you could be severed for before eventually it's like, oh, you need to leave at some point? And are they stalling so that they could still continue to be together? I don't know. I'm very curious to see what happens from there.
It's interesting that Mark S is the only one we've seen that's well. That's not true. I take that back because we saw kind of between Helly and Helena during season one, where they went back and forth. Maybe she played the video for herself,
Mhm.
but the camcorder one was a sort of a real tight back and forth. And if you notice, Mark Scout, the Audi, was outside having the conversation, while Mark Innie was inside the
Yes, yeah,
cabin
yep.
while they're having that conversation. And also the lighting was very different. Scout was outside where it was dark. Oh, it was scary. And Mark S inside, it was much lighter in there. And I think Mark S has every reason to be. He's right. He should not trust Mark Scout because Mark Scout has a goal. It's a stated goal. Free his wife, and once his wife is free, because the only reason he went into Severance was because his wife was dead.
Mhm.
Wife isn't dead now, has her back. Why would he ever go back?
Mhm.
And then Mark S is dead at that point.
Yep.
When it comes to actors and actresses, though, like I said, he did a great job. But the sort of, I think the sort of MVP of the show for acting quality is that the actress who plays Helly. She
Mhm.
does a great job at how she walks and how she talks and how she reacts, which is why Irving could, when Irving was able to pick her out that she is fake, I believed it because I picked it out. Like
Mhm.
she's walking different, she's
Yep.
speaking different, not a different accent, not a different way she, just the way the vernacular she uses, the way she carried herself. No, the she does a fantastic job in the season of really helping us understand when she is and when she is not Helly. Even though Helly and Helena watched videos of Helly and tried learning from that to pretend to be her.
Yep. Yep. I have a slightly different MVP for this season for very stupid reasons.
It's
Uh,
Milchek, isn't it?
oh, it's Milchek. It's Milchek for sure. And for two reasons. One, I do like going with the serious reason first. First of all, the actor that plays Milchek does a fantastic job. He always so the last two seasons, Milchek has kind of been a bit of a wild card in a lot of ways. And with Milchek as a character, one of the things that I think is addressed very well and very effectively is this whole notion that Black people in corporate America are treated to a whole different type of standard. And I wrote down on our on the outline like the review, for example. He goes through a review process, and this whole thing where Mr. Drummond, who he's a character that gets introduced this season and then gets killed in a Pulp Fiction, oh my God, we shot Marvin type of way that I found equal parts hilarious, but also equal parts, oh shit, that's yeah, this guy's straight up dead. And I'm wondering how that's going to have an effect on Mark. But, anyways, back to Milchek. Milchek goes through this review process where Mr. Drummond says, if this review goes on for more than 4 hours, we're going to order lunch for you. It's like, hopefully it won't. And they slide him the lunch menu because one of the things that they're saying to him is that, hey, you speak a little too eloquently sometimes. So if you could just in a way dumb it down, which you can't get any more insulting than that sometimes, especially in a corporate environment, but also the way that so many of the people treat him with like the paintings, for example. They give him the paintings of the evolution of the life of Keir Egan, and they've changed a lot of the paintings to represent a black man looking out into like at the sky and different things like that. It's like that's very pandering and just I love what it says about the way that black people are treated in corporate America. So there was a lot of good stuff there. However, to me, what makes him the MVP is that every company should have a choreography and merriment department. Anytime that something is accomplished, there should be a marching band. Well, for big accomplishments, not every accomplishment, because lots of people are achieving their goals on a daily basis. But if there's a major accomplishment that is made, there should be a marching band. There should be, dancing. That scene was fantastic. I loved that moment because it was so chaotic and kinetic. And also just the choreography and merriment department. What on earth are they doing? Like, are they just like practicing all like just practicing for this moment to come anytime that something big happens? Or are they going through this whole spiel throughout the course of like the entire company, which leads me to believe this is also another example of like I don't know what most of these departments do. Why on earth does Lumen have a choreography and merriment department? Even though the real question should be, why doesn't every company out in America have a choreography and merriment department?
Okay, so basically, a couple things. I like Milchek, fantastic actor. Physically, he's a fantastic actor. Like there's a scene where he jumps up on a table, like, and you can see the rage burning him. He could be wearing a Predator suit in that moment, and I would have been terrified.
Yeah,
We just watched Predator last night.
nice.
Yeah. But back to saying so, but Milchek suffers from sort of the middle manager problem in
Mhm.
corporate America, where he wants to be the upper group. He wants to be this upper echelon group, but he is not a part of them, and they do not view him as a part of him. He is another cog in the machine to them.
Mhm.
But he also views people beneath him to be the cog in the machine, and he is better than them,
Mhm.
which is why he treats them the way he does. Right? They're there to do something for him, whatever it is, and they get the job done, and he wishes to transfer up to there. But the same way you have an employee who does a good job on something or whatever, you show them appreciation. But at the end of the day, a lot of appreciation is just surface. Like, well, where's my bonus check then? Right? I like this placard you gave me that cost your company $25.36. But where is the bonus that goes with it, or the pay increase of pay? It's that sort of thing too. So them giving him that packet of paint portraits where they really just put blackface on Keir the whole for it was to say, hey, look, we think he would appreciate this, right? We bring you into our story because we know you want to be a part of us, but at the same time, it's hollow,
Mhm.
right? It's just a gesture. They didn't give him any more power. They didn't give him more responsibility. So they're actually just saying, like, keep up what you're doing. Now, speaking about the review, a lot of those critiques came from his assistant, which also says that the organization, the Lumen organization, is basically has spies everywhere. Like everyone is geared to rat you out,
Yeah.
right? It's to so like the big words problem was I think no one had a problem with it until she said something, and now they all have a problem with it.
Mhm.
right? Because yet again, being in the corporate side of things, you get these internal surveys all the time. And you see that one thing that sticks in your brain. The one person goes, yeah, I've got a problem. My manager uses giant words and I can't understand them. So from that point on, that's all you can think about when it comes to that manager, right? And you need some feedback to give that person. That's what it is. Now, in the choreographed merriment department, a lot of companies do have them. It's not choreographed, it's not bands jumping around, but they all have that panel of people they bring in of associates that their job is to bring up morale, right? That
Mhm.
they don't call them various departments, various things. And I remember when the previous company I worked with is that that group, I wasn't part of it, they plan the happy hours, they plan the Halloween costume party and all that sort of stuff. But they like really what is that supposed to do? It's supposed to make you feel good, makes you feel like you're part of a family, but in actuality you're not, right? It's supposed to cover up the stress of what the actual organization is all about, right?
Mhm.
It's to gloss over those things. That's really what the choreographed merriment department is. And I was looking at an interview actually where one of the people who were the band players for the core, he was actually talking about sort of his experience with it. Now they weren't giving backstories or anything like that, but the other people in the other actors all joked that they felt that their rule was they had one job outside, but inside all they do is practice all day long, and then that way, when the time came, they just
They were ready.
executed.
Yep.
Like if you notice, like those guys don't stop for anything. I mean, there's literally like a fight breaking out around them, and but nothing stops them until Helly sort of rallies the troops,
Yeah.
and Dylan stands there like a major, holding them behind him. Like, no, who are you going to take from who? No, this is the next uprising.
Hmm.
And that's essentially what it is like that. So back to Milchick though. Milchick like suffers a middle manager problem where he wants to be something greater. But if you can tell, he also is angry of his role. He's angry how he's treated. He tries to connect with the woman that talks for the board. I forgot what her name was. And he tries to connect with her, but she puts on that big smile and she pushes right past it, right? They're not friends, right? But they're also not enemies. They're just coworkers,
Hmm.
right? They're there to get a task done. And he's looking for that. So down the road, he potentially could be, he could potentially flip. I could see that happening.
I could see him totally flipping also for a redemptive arc as well.
Yeah.
Her name is Natalie.
Natalie, that's right.
The person who speaks for the board just kind of feels like a mouthpiece, just repeating all the information. Also, they have a conversation where it's like, I earned my place here too, and
Mhm.
there's a little bit on the condescending side to
Mhm.
Milchak. It's like, did he not earn his place here?
Yeah.
And this also kind of comes into question about how Miss Cobell ran things versus how Milchek ran things, and how he needed to tighten the leash a little bit because he is trying his best. Kind of like what you said, that what middle management has to do, it's the push and pull there, is that you need to potentially keep this group in line and in check. They're not your friends. They are people that you're in charge of. And that is anybody who is elevated into management. That is the thing that you got to contend with, is that you need to balance the fact that you've got a job, you've got goals, you've got things that you need to accomplish, but these people are not your friends anymore, or they're not just your friends.
Yeah.
They report to you too. So I see that a lot in his transition as well, from being part of this group. He wasn't in charge of them, but he was kind of like a middle manager there too, between Harmony and this group. And now he's in charge of it, and now he's just stuck in a very similar way, but now he's just got more responsibility and more people breathing down his neck for
And
it.
the other thing too, like we go back to that middle manager problem too, is that when Harmony leaves, right? When
Mhm.
Cabell leaves, he takes on the position sort of by default,
Yeah.
right? And we see this in organizations all the time, where the manager of that unit leaves, the assistant manager takes over, but it's not necessarily a permanent position for them, right? They're kind of testing the waters with them to see if that works or not for them, which often he didn't go up against 12 other applicants for that job, right? Did he really earn this? He kind of fell into it. So I can see now. So that's why the question comes up from upper management is like they can look at it saying, you really didn't, because if you were that good, you would have had the job already.
Hmm.
But you just sort of fell into this. So you got to earn it even more than anybody else would. You got to struggle for it. But we got your back. Here are these pictures.
Right.
um,
This, this is how we're going to show you that we got you
yeah.
in that way. Um, so you mentioned that you wanted to talk about Gemma a little bit more. So let's talk about Gemma.
Okay.
What do you want to bring up?
So I think that the interesting thing about Gemma is we are introduced to Gemma, reintroduced to Gemma in episode 9, I believe it was. And episode 10 is we spent a lot of time with it. But I think 9 was the episode was very Gemma heavy.
Mhm.
And we see not Gemma outside, we're talking about the anyone. So we don't know why she works there. We don't know because there was a car accident that was used to sort of cover up her death. And I don't think this is the cloning facility. I don't think they've got a way to sort of make, which a lot of people talked about, right? Like maybe it's a clone, or maybe maybe this is a breeding facility. Who knows? I don't think it's what it is. I think she went to go work for them. Because how long it was going to take, said she died.
Mhm.
And what they're doing is they're having her go through a variety of tests to see can we remove basic trauma or basic uncomfortableness or basic things I don't want to deal with, and as well as sort of bigger ones. And you see things like there's a whole scene where she goes into the dentist's office, and imagine your whole existence is every time you wake up, you're in the dentist chair.
Mhm.
Like that is traumatic,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And and the actual real Gemma, all she knows is her jaw is sore a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Or the one she's got to hand write all those thank you cards. And we see in the earlier scene where she says, I don't like writing thank you cards. Now she's got to write all these thank you cards. Or she's on the plane, the plane has turbulence and feels very sort of like from the 50s or 60s.
Mhm.
And it's interesting that they're testing out different things of the spectrum of things that are we just don't like to do,
Mhm.
right? Versus scary things, right? Because they have this whole four tempers sort of mindset of what it means of a human's personality or spirit.
Mhm.
And then at the very, very end, it's like, okay, now we've tested the waters of these other 24 severed people. They've severed her to 25 pieces, right? Now, since we've been able to isolate, because they have like an engineering testing thing, right? They're testing out different parts of her personality, and they've learned to isolate those bugs. And now the final test is we come together and we test all those little modules put together and see if they all work. And
Mhm.
that's really what it feels like. It's like an engineering test
Yep.
of the Severance chip itself for this final chip. One thing I think noticed, which I haven't seen many people talk about, but there's the scene where Mark finishes it, and there's the wax figure of Egan watching over him. And I bring it up because he has his reward, and it shows like a waffle,
Yeah.
like that. Do you notice there are 25 pockets of the waffle?
I did notice that and found it very symbolic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which that character, the wax figure of that we mentioned Milchek and the wax figurine back and forth. Very
Oh,
interesting scene.
very
Uh,
interesting scene and very indicative of just the like how upper management sometimes feels about middle management, just feeling like they can just constantly give them negative anything and they're just gonna keep coming back.
well, and not just that too. It's like I've been in those meetings where like the jokes are laid out, right? And you're like, I'll say this line, you say this line, I'll say this line, you say this line, and they are not funny.
No,
They were never funny.
they're horribly awkward.
They're horribly awkward, but they were relatively safe
Mhm.
until later on, right? Um, and I've seen those meetings. It's one thing I love about the show is it takes the corporate office culture and dials it to 11
Mhm.
on everything. The absurdity of this is it happens in corporate America, just not that level. Most get to like a 7 or an 8, but I mean they go all the way up to 11 on this thing.
Mhm.
So it's interesting. And what's interesting too is like, so Gemma is in this last sort of circle it back. Gemma's in this last room. She's deconstructing the Cold Harbor crib. In walks Mark Scout, right? Because the hallway is not severed.
Mhm.
It's only the rooms that are severed. And he pulls her out of into the hallway, and now they're running for their life. Dude is covered in blood.
Just no question
No
about that.
question.
Just okay, this
Yeah.
you need to come with me. And she's like, okay, yeah, I'll do that.
And I thought it was funny though. The nurse that's down there is like, "You can't be here," and is not threatened by the gun at all, and just leaves.
Mhm.
But it's interesting that this company has gotten to a point where they believe that whatever they're doing for the betterment of humanity is worth the kidnapping of people
Yep.
and effectively torturing 25 personality types.
Yep.
I still don't know what the goats are for, but
I was so I
well,
was
yes and
gonna
no, I know what they're for, but
so the goats, to some extent or another, they've got to represent some form of sacrifice. But um that was something, because you mentioned cloning, and it's like, well, are we sure that it's not cloning to some extent or another that they're looking to ultimately do? Because wasn't the first animal ever cloned, was it a
I think
goat or a sheep?
it was a sheep. I
It was
think, yeah,
Dolly, I think Dolly the sheep, I
yeah.
think. But that whole thing with the goats really confused me. And not only that, but also the oddball collection of people that they assembled. And poor, look, I love Gwendolyn Christie as a performer. I think she's great. I think between this and what they did to her in the Star Wars, like the Star Wars, the second pocket of
Yeah, yeah.
sequels that they did, like, when is Gwendolyn Christie ever going to get a break? Well, and even to like even in Game of Thrones, it's like, dude, Jamie did not choose you, and that sucks because I thought that the relationship was really good. But anyways, back to the goat thing. Um, that's another one that this is a second instance of getting something goat related and just not a whole lot of answers. There's a lot of like strong theories out there,
Yeah.
but still a lot of questions about what these goats are supposed to mean.
So I think there's multiple facets of this, and obviously I don't know the answers, but one thing is a lot of goat thing ties into, I think, into the cultish nature of the Kier family.
Mhm.
Like they built, because these entities are naive when they arrive there, they will believe whatever you tell them.
Yep.
Like Irving treats it almost like the Bible,
Yep.
but he's reiterating it back. It's like it's scripture. So I think a lot of it ties into that. Like it's almost like cult like behavior. When there is a tradition of the scapegoat, right? The priest takes two goats. One, all the sins of the people are put onto, and then it's cast out of the village, and it takes all the sins with it. So I think we see that ceremony kind of happen when I think she dresses up in like a sort of very formal 1920s, like we're talking like 1800s no, level of garb.
Mhm.
And they're going to kill this goat. But if you see the words Drummond uses, the actor, the actor for him, he's from Iceland. He's great. He was talking about like, this animal takes on the sins of the thing, all the ills of this person, and all this. So I think the goats really represent, to make them feel better about the sins they are about to commit, the immoral actions they're about to do, is they put all of that onto the goat.
Mhm.
And the goat is that scapegoat. And then when that goat is killed, their sins are gone. Is it actually doing in a metaphysical sense? No.
No.
It's just all ceremony. But a lot of what they do is just ceremony brought to another level. I think that's really what that is. Now, why do they have so many goats for it? Do not know. But he asked questions like, "Is he the most? What was how do you put it?" Drummond said, "Is like basically like, is he the craziest of the goats? Is he like the worst of the goats?" He uses other words for it. Big vocabulary. I'm not Milchek, so his vocabulary is bigger than mine. But basically highlighting the fact that this goat is the bad goat, right?
Mhm.
And so he gets to take all of our sins of what we're about to do to Gemma.
Mhm.
So there's that cult sort of undertone of the lumen people, and then their corporate side of it. I think there's like a balance. Like you saw like the waffle party, all that kind of stuff. Very
Mhm.
cultish behavior, very pseudo religious behavior.
Mhm.
And so I think that's what part of the goats are for, is that goats are used for. Now the goat represents one of the four tempers as well. I forgot which one it is. There were like there are four tempers. One is like the old lady, one is the young woman, one is, I think it's a guy, and then it's like a goat. But they all represent one of the four tempers, and the goats represent one of those four. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I have the goats around, because the tempers idea of spirituality is very important to the Lumen organization. But then they also lean on that whole scapegoat concept that it's biblical. I think it's actually might be in the Bible.
Mhm.
And that's why that process is now. It's a very sort of sterile way of doing it. I mean, they actually have a box designed to hold the goat in place, and they're using, and it's not a humane way to kill that goat.
Oh no, no,
It's
God no.
it's it's a device used to kill cattle where it sends the prod into the brain, just kills it with a bullet, but the bullet doesn't actually enter it, so that way the animal's still clean. Um, there's no gunpowder or that kind of thing, and which is the device that kills Mr. Drummond later on.
Right.
Because which you kind of saw coming because you're like, oh wait, he's about to switch. He doesn't know that the new marks and just might flinch. He flinches, Drummond's dead, and that's what he
That's
does.
exactly what happens.
Yeah.
So, and with going back to also this cultish behavior, we get to experience a little bit of that on the Audi side when Harmony goes back to what we think is either a hometown or at least somewhere where she grew up, and the either it's the caretaker or someone that she knows for her mom is very much drinking this Kool-Aid
Yeah,
about
it's her aunt.
yeah, and it's bad. It's like she is straight up just she is gone all just for all intents and purposes. But in this, we also discover that there's pretty clear evidence that Harmony is the one that has come up with a lot of the designs for a lot of these procedures, processes, and even everything with the severance procedure. And I'm very curious to see where that ultimately goes because did and this is something that happens in business and this is one of the things that I love about Severance is that it is taking all of these things when it comes to business ethics and just all kinds of things when it comes to just industry and just being titans of industry is that one person has an idea and then that person gets squashed somehow in order for somebody else who's got more drive and ambition to take that idea and run with it and take it to the next level. I'm not exactly sure where that is going to go or if that's even going to play out at some point, but that is the trump card that Harmony has, even though I'm not exactly sure I know what she's going to do with it yet.
So for Harvey, I see it as I think you're right. It does speak to corporate America and the fact that I've seen many times where people have created an idea and the CEO runs with it, and it's now the CEO's idea,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, well, I was in that meeting. That's not what happened, but that doesn't matter at that point. And the person that gave the idea feels good because they're being recognized for it in the sense of like, good job, you did a fantastic job. We love your ideas. Keep it up. And then they go run with it. And the person, as long as you're part of that company, they're feeling good, right?
Yeah.
But the moment the company betrays them, which they inevitably do, because it's a whole I think of like, no, do you give 2 weeks notice or just walk out the door? They're going to fire you the same day. But I mean, so same sort of like mindset. Harmony, I think the reason now that surprised some people that Harmony played such a large role in it, but it doesn't surprise me at all because I've seen it happen. But that's also why she was in charge of that floor was because that she was there watching the experiment play out. Her experiment was not the testing floor. Her experiment was, is it working? Right. And they're the ones actually doing the work or refining for the testing floor. So she's there to watch her project unfold. What is her future? I still don't trust Harmony because I don't think Harmony has come full circle on a character arc. She hasn't like redeemed herself. What she's there for, she is the systems expert, meaning she's the one who knows how the system works. She's the one that's going to create a solution to the system. She's the one that's helped tweak it. That's why she's like, I must talk to any Mark. I got to figure out what he knows and that kind of thing. So I think down the road, she's going to be the person who creates the magic bullet that solves a technology issue, such as like how do we turn on an innie when they're inside the building, or how do we turn it out? She's the one because she's a systems expert on that to know that. And that's what her role is going to be going forward. She's the rogue villain of the story, and we're going to use her to help us get to the good at the end of the story. Hopefully, the story ends with a good happy ending. But that's what she's there for, right? So she's there to be the technical expert to help us get to that. So that way, when we have a problem with like, well, how will they know how to do this thing with the device, right? Harmony knows. Right. We see why when PD pretty much dies from his reintegration because I forgot her name doesn't do it right. Right. Well, now Harmony can work with her to make it better. or
Mhm.
show you where she went wrong because she has more knowledge. So anytime we need a sort of, I don't want to say magical solution, but a technological solution or a question to answer for exposition purposes, Harmony can play that role. But I don't think she's going to be a good character, meaning like
No,
good,
no.
like when I'm saying good, I mean a she's not going to be, she will still be evil. Let's put it that way. She'll be a fantastic character, but she's not going to be a good character.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend at this
Yes.
point.
And in fact,
And
she's just looking for revenge.
yep. And there was something else that she says during that episode. It's like the eighth episode. Because first of all, like it feels like this town that she's in, they're like manufacturing ether or something, and they are all getting high, or a lot of people are getting high off of it, which very interesting to see. I'm wondering if that is kind of like a metaphor for what this cult is supposed to be like for all these individuals. They're just, you
Well,
know,
ether was a real thing.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that, but um, I'm just wondering where that like comes into play with all of this, or if it's going to come into play at all. With is this how Lumen as a company they first started to get people to comply with them? Is using ether, and then they're just expanding that to just a grander scale. But one thing that she also said is that she had been working in that factory since she was like a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And this also connects with the big mystery for me this season was who is Mrs. Wang and why is she here? Like, I'm very, I was very confused, especially at the beginning, because the first part of this season, all she was a punching bag in a way, because some of the funniest moments in this involve all of them kind of making fun of the fact that she is a child. Like not a teenager, not a young adult. She is a straight up child working in this like big floor as kind of like this super advanced internship that she got. One thing that Dylan said was like, is it weird that like, can I make fun of you yet for being a child? Like that was a funny moment. But then as the season progresses, she's got this like totem game that she's playing, this like ring toss game that she has to destroy at the end of the season. And I still am a little curious to see where this is going to go moving forward. But Chris, do you have any thoughts on
Yes, we get a little
Miss?
of that with Harmony. We a little hit that. So Harmony goes when she's at her aunt's house trying to see where her mother's old room. She's trying to get those severance plans, the original plans to prove she was the best. And her actions there, just a side dovetail a little bit on that, was that she acts like a betrayed employee. Like you get an employee who worked for you for 20 years and you let him go because you downsize. That's how they act, right? Understandably, right? And so that's why I'm saying her motivations for doing what she's about to do, I think, make sense. But now, while she's in that little hovel, that little hole in the ground, or whatever that is, because her aunt said she sold her belongings to the poor. Who sells stuff to the poor? But she's she's in there. It was such one of those weird statements they used. You see yearbooks of when Harmony was part of the same program that Mrs. Hong is part of now.
Mhm,
So I think what that really is they if you work as a kid, and obviously child labor is not a problem in this universe,
mhm,
and they see some potential in you, they put you in this program. This program is really, like you said, a souped up internship that you stay in for a year. Remember, she's leaving a little sooner than normal, and that way you can see what it looks like working for Lumen at different aspects of it. And if they like you, your supervisor likes you, you then go off to this academy where they then groom you for management. So I think really it's sort of, I think of it that way, sort of a private school slash internship that she goes through. And I think if my memory is serving me properly, the name of the school is named after one of the old Kiers.
yep.
And so I think that's really what that is that it's sort of like a farming league of people. And you get them young enough, you put them in the cult, they're going to believe whatever you tell them.
Mhm.
And that's really what it is. And she's in that little totem you kind of mentioned. That was a game she played to keep herself distracted because her job was very boring at times. But I think the reason he destroys it because it's a representation of her childhood,
Childhood. Yep.
and she needs to give up childish things to move on,
Grow
or as
up. Grow
grow up.
up.
Just about to
Grow
say
up.
that, yeah.
Yep.
As Milchek sort of goes over, instead of just giving up what was it, like child frivolities or something like that, you must, instead just eventually gets that down to the word just grow up, because obviously she doesn't like big words. But that's really, I think, sort of the point of that totem is that's a representation of her past, needs to be destroyed to be able to move forward. But she is like, yes, a souped up internship. So schools, I don't think are a thing. Because remember, at one point they go back to the old college, which just isn't there anymore.
Right.
So I think the Lumen Industries, when it moves into a town, just destroys the town.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know why. We don't know why that's a thing. Back to your statement about the ether, though, I think Lumen started as an ether company, right? Which was the drug of the times. And I think Harmony, she was an employee there, and her when you're hot up on ether, you kind of separate, you disassociate from what you're doing in that moment. And I think that inspired for the Severance. Like, what if people could do that? Like, this job sucks
What if they could do that without ether?
without ether.
Yeah.
And because she saw it happening with ether and she was inspired by that. And I think, yeah, if I can find a way to do this without ether and a way to disassociate, so when you're working these hard factories, you don't suffer, like you don't feel bad from it, because you understand too, Keir, I think from the evidence they put forward, he was born around the Confederate, like about the Civil War period,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a soldier of the South, right? And I think so. The idea of creating this, not to come out wrong, but like creating a sort of like an under group of people, an underclass, basically your innies, to do the labors, whatever those labors might be, he would not be deterred from that concept.
Mm-hmm.
So I think and of course that feeds into the corporation and what they think, and sort of creating a subclass of humans that just do the work for you and everyone else can reap the benefits. And if it's your own body, is it really sort of immoral to do that? And what we found, I think we have discovered over the course of 2 seasons of the show is yes, it is.
It is absolutely, absolutely something's wrong with it. But to them, ends justify the means.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and that is what a lot of corporate entities out there. That's what how a lot of them operate. It doesn't matter how we got there; it matters the results at the end of the day.
And I think it's funny. Like I was talking to my buddy and we were talking about, he has not seen the show, and I brought up the show and talked about the concept of it. And his first thought was, I would love it if I could do that instead of be a gym bro. Right. And I've said that before. And at first you're like, on the surface, you're like, that sounds like a good idea. But then when you start thinking about it, like I said, that's what the show is telling us. Like, no, that is not a good idea. Here are all the ethical quandaries you're about to enter by having that kind of lifestyle. Which I think is one of the great things about the show too, is it makes you answer these questions. At no point have they come out to you and said, this is the right answer for it. But I think just by the evidence put out for us, you and I are on the same page. It is a bad decision.
It is a bad decision. Yep.
Though I think one thing we haven't touched upon is that there were talks of like protests in the show. There were talks of like people, like if you have been a severed, they don't want, like when Dylan goes work for the door factory, he finds out he's severed. He's like, no, we don't want you here.
That the discrimination there was definitely something that I noticed, especially because Dylan, by all accounts, whether he's faking it or whether he actually knows his stuff, knows some stuff about doors. So he would actually be a decent fit for a company like this. And it seemed like he was getting along pretty well with the guy that was interviewing him, which kind of looked like a older version. Him. Yeah, looked like an older version of him. And that
I was half expecting him to say, I can see myself in you.
Yeah. And that would have been very on the nose and also, but very accurate. And then all of a sudden, as soon as he finds out that he's severed, he's like, no, get out. Just, we don't, almost stopping short of saying, we don't like your kind here. And that was a fascinating turn, especially given everything that we learn about Dylan throughout the course of the season, is that there is something going on in his Audi life that causes him to not have the same level of confidence. And Gretchen, his wife, just fascinating, a lot of fascinating conversations that they have about your innie. Like, Gretchen gets to visit the innie Dylan kind of as a reward, even though it doesn't feel like a reward. It feels like something that they're using to
Manipulate them.
manipulate him. And it works a little bit, but also the way that Gretchen talks about the innie version of Dylan to his outie, and it's like this is the person that you want to be. It's like, oh, that's that's tough
Or the
to,
person you
to
used to be.
yeah, exactly. And that's tough. And but that's where kind of the whole premise of kind of your theory about how like they are looking to remove the trauma, remove all these things so that you can be the either the best version of yourself or a blank slate
Yeah.
version of yourself where possibilities are endless. And but this is where the innie and outie dilemma comes in because you've got Mark who's got a wife, but then you've got Dylan who you're not just dealing with and messing with a loving relationship, you're also messing with kids as
Mhm.
well. And that presents a whole other set of problems that I'm very curious to see where they go moving forward with that.
Well, let's talk about the discrimination real fast. And it's I want to play sort of a I want to say devil's advocate in it, but sort of let's look for the perspective of the recruiter or the guy that owns the door factory. Let's say your world is divided between those who have been severed and those who have not been severed. And the severed employees, let's be honest, they all have a commonality between them. They've all had some serious trauma that they could not cope with, which is why they severed.
Mhm.
So I'm an employer and I'm trying to hire the best employee out there. And he seemed like a nice guy. I'm not saying he's as bad as Lumen or anything like that, but he's like, okay, I got a candidate in front of me, and he's been severed recently. Recently, this wasn't like something happened a decade ago, right? Why was he severed? There's something that happened in his life. Is he going to be a stable employee for me to have here? I'm not saying that's the right mindset to have. That's probably the mindset he had, and why that discrimination is there is because those people who take the severed path are the ones who have had sort of mental trauma, who have had problems. Are they still stable? And me personally, yes, I believe everyone can get past their thing and eventually grow out of it and do well. And it is discriminatory, and it is sort of saying like he doesn't know this person. He doesn't know why Dylan got severed. He like for all we know, maybe it's because his mother passed away. We don't even know why he's severed, and we're the audience who see everything. And but I can see that's probably the mindset he has and why there's that discrimination. He's like, from the general concept, he got severed for a reason. I don't know what that reason is, right? Will he be a good employee or not?
But to your point as well, but that also goes to show this is also it's not just Lumen, it's just a lot of corporations. They're looking at individuals who work for them, not so much as individuals, but you are labor. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. And for these individuals or for these companies, if they're looking at things from a labor cost perspective, they got to look at things from all different angles in order to maximize what that labor output is going to be. And if severance is something that causes people to have pause about
Mm-hmm.
hiring somebody because it could potentially depreciate the labor that they output for that company, then they have to take that into account.
Yep. And also, they don't know long term, ramifications of having a severed chip in your brain. You know, will you be out of work because of medical leave? I mean,
Mhm.
so I'm not saying what he was doing is right, but I think that's really why there a discrimination exists in the severed employees, and it's weird, right?
It's it,
It's I think it's like the door guy cannot understand why Dylan would have done it, right? And it is not a small decision for your life. So to understand, he's like probably saying like, I don't get it. It's weird to me. It might be cringy. It might be even dangerous, right? Maybe you'll switch the NE all of a sudden. And the NE is really a mass murderer. I'm not hiring the NE. I'm
yeah,
hiring you. And
yeah,
I have no and now we also know as an audience, they can flip that switch. It is possible.
it is possible. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That is, yeah. There's a lot to think about from that because anybody who gets hired at an organization, they're also like any new hire, they're taking a calculated risk on
Yes.
somebody, and it's all about risk at the end of the day. And if there is a risk that somebody is a flight risk and will leave after a certain point of time, because I feel like that's potentially a risk with a lot of like younger generations of workers that there is a risk potentially of somebody leaving just so that they can find find a role that will give them more money, less responsibility, and they will get the title that they want at a different company or organization in a timely manner. And that is something that organizations take into account when it comes to a risk taking on somebody. And I could see that potentially being like part of the calculus that a lot of people, a lot of recruiters take in order to reconcile whether or not they're going to push someone forward. And Severance, if you so just to continue on this devil's advocate thing, if you knew somebody, if you were talking with them at a bar, or hell, you're podcasting with someone, and you found out that person was severed, isn't the small part of you going to be like, what's up with that?
Yeah.
At minimum, at
Why should you do
minimum,
that?
what's up with that? Like, what's that like? What's going on? What really happened? And then once you dig in a little deeper, it's like, oh, I'm not sure what to make of
Yeah.
all of this. Like, I'm not saying you or I would ever go to the full scale, like, discriminatory practice that this person had, or this door interviewer, door
Yeah.
company man had, but at minimum, we'd be like, huh. It
What
would,
is it? What's this
what's
potential
up?
can of worms that's sitting in front of me?
Exactly. Yep.
It's like a ticking time bomb. You don't know how much time is in front of you. Yeah.
Hmm. Yep. Ooh, we've talked about a lot of stuff. Is there? I think the only other thing that I had on the list, Devin, Mark's sister, and even Rickon to some extent or another. Which to me, this season, Rickon is just one of those characters. It's like, why are you here right now? But one of the things that happened and doesn't really get resolved that much is that Rickon's got this book that somebody at Lumen wants to talk to him about having like a specific any version of that, which to me feels very like, oh, let's make this very separate but equal type of thing. But I'm very curious about where that's ultimately going to lead to because I have a feeling that Devin, who's Mark Scout's sister, is going to help Pseudo lead this outsiders rebellion against Lumen. Like, I'm not saying like full scale, like, oh, we're going to go to war with Lumen, but she's going to be one of those individuals who's going to help try to bring Lumen as a company down. It's either that or she's just going to be potentially a leverage point for Lumen to have against Mark Scout now that he has decided that he would rather, now that Mark S has decided that Helly is the thing that he wants versus, you know, Mark Scout wanting Gemma back.
Yeah, I kind of view it as his book is more because it's psychobabble. Like there's nothing concrete in there. You can actually get the audiobook, by the way. It's out. And it is and he's the narrator for it, by the way. And it's
Fantastic.
hilarious because it is like one of those various books, the self-help books that come out and like empower yourself by being and like this like I said, it's all psychobabble. But the reason I bring that, I think it's important too, is because remember, we keep going back to the innies are naive, right? They have no trauma. The reason why you make good decisions in your life is actually because all the mistakes you've made to get here, right? All the bad stuff in your life are the things that help drive your decisions going forward. And people that become less open is because they probably have had less bad things happen to them, right? The more
Mm.
trusting person, less bad things. You haven't been betrayed enough. Let's get on that. But all seriousness is that so this book is psychobabble. So when they read that book, like Irving was reading that book, and he was like reading it like as if it was like sacrilegious doctrine,
Mhm.
right? It's just as powerful as the Kier books, right? So I think what they're looking at is a point of control for the innies, not necessarily Mark in particular, but just control.
Just
So
all
I
of, yeah.
so I can take this book and I can change certain words in here and make it so like they're more trusting and everything that's like, okay, there's this outside source that's saying that we should be more compliant. This is not just here. Now I've got two data points saying I should be more compliant and I should love my life doing this. And it just allows them more control
Mhm.
and everything. And at the same time, it also allows the Lumen Corporation to have more tendrils inside the Mark S family
Mhm.
because the spouse, his sister, is actually trying to get him out of it.
Mhm.
right? Her husband is an idiot. He wrote this book. He's still an idiot. All his friends are idiots. They're all dumb, but so they can manipulate him even better.
Mhm.
Um, and there was a I that some this one I was reading somewhere about a theory, and I haven't put much stock into it yet, nor have I spent much time thinking about it. But that everyone there's that party he throws for the announcement of his book, but that everyone at that party had been severed at some point.
Mhm.
Because the way they say their names, whether the way they talk about themselves, like it feels like that they all feel like a bunch of innies.
Mhm.
So they all could be retired employees from being from at Lumen,
Yeah.
and their brain got mushed.
Very, because you use the word control, and that is a big crux of what a lot of this show is trying to say,
Mhm.
particularly about the innies. And it is not lost on me that given everything that is going on with corporate America, and specifically how these tech companies are starting to become almost too big to control, and also having this undue and this almost unlimited influence that they have on all of our lives right now, because it is not just technology that a lot of these companies in real life are are not are working with right now. It is so much bigger than that. And I think that's kind of one of the scary things that I'm still wondering about with Lumen, is because even just on the severed floor, you've got macro data refinement, you've got O&D, you've got these goats that are just randomly out there, choreography and merriment, and then you've got this floor, this secret floor where they're doing all of these experiments and trying to figure out what they're doing with Gemma, or Miss Casey, as she's known on the severed floor. So you've got all of these, and we still don't have a 100% clear picture of what Lumen as a company is from the outside perspective or from the inside perspective. And I think that for me, that's going to be the big thing that I'm looking for season three, is that I need a little bit more clarity on what Lumen as a company does. Now, whether they save that for season four is, I guess, to be determined. I just hope that there's not a 3 year gap. And by all accounts, the main thing that would probably cause a little bit of a gap are these wildfires that happened in Los Angeles that were just devastating for a lot of these communities. So I'm very curious about that. And I think that's going to be the big linchpin of what I need in order for me to just keep going with this show, is that I need more answers on what Lumen as a company does.
Yeah, when Ben Stiller was talking about the renewal for season three, he was joking it come out in 2045. The I think you're right, but it also speaks to like large conglomerate corporations in general have their fingers in so many things. You never know what it fully does. In
Mhm.
fact, because once you get above about 100 and couple employees, 200 employees, little departments, you're like, I'm not sure what they do over there exactly. And like I said,
Mhm.
this show is about dialing the absurdity up to 11, right?
Yeah.
Like you can have somebody like at some point in a corporation's life, they decide it's better to do something in house than paying someone else to do it,
Mhm.
such as marketing, such as processing, such as a mailroom, or building their own doors. They
Mhm.
decide at some point it makes more sense to have goats raised inside the building than it is just to buy a goat
Yeah.
whenever we need it. They find that that's a better cost saving. So I think a lot of the stuff that's happening, they had just gotten so big that they've determined it makes more sense to do it in house financially than outside. So like let's say the merriment division, right? They might throw a party like that once a year, maybe 5 times a year for different departments, right? Total. Well, they found out it's cheaper for us just to have the 20 people on staff to do it whenever we want to at the drop of a hat than it is to bring in a band to do it. Maybe they've determined that, right? Or for all we know, we only see this one band happen. We only see this one event happen. Maybe it happens every week, right? Maybe they practice for it, and they go to a different. Maybe they go over to the door making department and celebrate the new model of door they've released. Once we don't know, right?
Mhm.
So I think some of those questions we may never get the answer to. I think the direction they're probably going to go with, and I think we sort of change gears into like what is the future of the show. I think they're going to go more into peeling back more of the layers of that mystery we talked about and getting more to the core of what is Lumen's big grand design of what they're trying to go to. Like, because the board, like, who is the board? Who's on the board? Right? We don't know. It's and because the head of Lumen doesn't seem to answer to them. They just seem to talk through Natalie, right? That's her name, and he doesn't seem to answer them. Though I do have to ask one question: why does he have an elevator that lets out to one single room, which has this computer, so he can watch Gemma? That is super creepy. Like, who designed this building?
It's super creepy, but also, doesn't that feel like something who's got a ton of money and feels invincible? Doesn't that seem like something that some
Of
bullshit
course,
that they would do? It's very supervillain-esque, but it also feels like, hey, this is an odd flex
yeah.
for for me to have with others, but it's also a big flex for me to show, look at what I can do as a person. I am in charge, and this is something that I can do that 99.8% of individuals cannot do.
Yeah, I have enough money and power to make people do absurd things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so season 3, where I think I would hope to see it go to is, like I said, they start answering more of these questions. I think we're leading to a revolt. I think
Mhm.
we're actually leading to a true revolt on the severed floor of Severed Floor. If I remember correctly, and I maybe have to go back and rewatch season 1, but there was a talk at one point of a revolution that did occur in the past, which is why they have all these paintings they put up to talk about, how good everybody is and how they should be doing things. So I think we're about to see another revolt within Lumen, and to sort of see, and then I think that's going to be the crossroads of, like, now we've got two groups of people with the same body. What do we do with them? But
Mhm.
to get there, I think we're going to learn more about sort of what is Lumen's ultimate design. What are they going for? And I don't think we're going to learn about, like, why they have all these little departments. I don't think we're going to learn about that. I think that's gonna be the quirkiness of the show. That's going to keep it. That's going to stay there forever. They'll add a new one. There'll be an excuse for Milchek to dance again. Now, there are certain things they'll keep bringing back.
Mhm.
But I think the direction they're going to go with it is going to be, like I said, what is the ultimate goal, what they're trying to achieve, and then we discover that over the next season. Season 4 will be stopping that overarching goal and
Mhm.
resolving the any outie divide. But I think next season is literally just finding out the ultimate goal of living.
I feel like that's the route that they have to go at this
Mm-hmm.
point, because otherwise, what else can you introduce that it would feel like the whole story and the whole plot would feel unsustainable?
Yeah.
You can't introduce a competitor. You can't introduce government intervention or regulation. Like, you have to keep the story a little bit more contained.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, by all accounts, it seems like Lumen is like this larger than life company that feels like it doesn't have to answer to anybody. So you got to focus on Lumen and what's kind of here. Like, it would not surprise me if there is no board. It's just like one or two people, and that's really it. And it would not surprise me also if Lumen is this company that they will find ways to, like, crush other competitors, and they're like one of the only industries out there that is just doing what they're doing. And they're I a revolt, yes, because, like, I can see a revolt happening with a lot of the characters on the show. It's not going to be like a bloody revolt or anything
Yeah.
like that. It would feel more like kind of like
A strike.
a larger and potentially more violent version of a strike.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also, like, it's very curious that you say, like, it did not. I didn't catch the part where they said that, like, a relative of Kier or somebody, like, this happened during, like the makings of this company, or like his origin comes from like the Civil War and him,
Yeah.
like, w- being a Confederate soldier. It's like that imagery and that symbolism is not lost on me, in that, where we have like one nation divided, based on like two different perspectives, on things. But I'm very curious also how they're going to reconcile everything with severed employees. And also, I'm just very curious to see what the path forward is for them. Because if it is really all about control, and also being a more malleable version of individuals so that it could be used for a purpose, maybe not a nefarious purpose, depending on the perspective. Because if a corporation is looking to do this for a purpose, they're going to see it as a just and profitable, like, because profitable can mean good or bad, or it doesn't mean good or bad, it just means profitable at the end
Yeah.
of the day. And for them it could be justified. For others out there, like for example Devin, or like people who are not part of Lumen, they could look at it and they're thinking, huh, this isn't good, this feels very evil corporation, very James Bond villain-esque territory for that. So I'll be curious to see from there. I I'm just at this point for season three, I'm looking for answers, and the main place I'm looking for with more answers is Lumen.
Yeah.
And if it gives me more of that, I'm gonna be happy. At the end of the day, I'm a completionist. I'm one of those people who watched all those seasons of, like, minus The Simpsons because I can't do it. But like I watched all those seasons of The Big Bang Theory, even though I hated myself for doing it because I just needed to finish it. So I'm gonna be there for the end of this. I just
Mhm.
need more answers in order for me to watch this week to week versus binging it like a couple months later once I probably get spoiled on all the answers for this down the road. So um, Chris, anything else? I think we've uncovered most of the stones here, but is there anything else that you wanted to talk about with Severance season two, or just Severance in general about where we're going moving forward?
No, I'd say if someone's made it this far along the show and they have not seen Severance, you need to go back and watch it.
Yeah.
And the thing about the that no matter how much we've talked, and we've been talking for quite some time today, that we have not uncovered the majority of it. It is an iceberg of a show
Mhm.
that go back, watch. You'll see things that we didn't even bring up or we didn't even mention that we may have missed or we were keeping back. It's worth the watch. For the future of the show, I'm looking forward to it. I feel bad that it's going to probably be a couple years till we see it. I've got to find other shows to watch in the meantime, I guess. But and there's a ton of those shows out there.
Mhm.
But Severance has a unique place in the sci-fi genre right now,
Mhm.
and it's a dystopian future that's very clean.
Mhm.
Which is very different than a lot of other shows that are out there for that. So I'd say if you like dystopian sort of shows, this is it. Go check
Mhm.
this out. It's a smaller cast, which is nice, but a lot of characters.
Mhm. Yes. And not only that, all of these people are A plus performances right now.
Oh
Like
yeah.
Adam Scott to me right now is, he feels a bit like a lock for at minimum a nomination for his performance, but he also feels like a front runner right now because he's doing, like, they're all doing amazing work, but Adam Scott right now, like just for that camcorder scene alone and that episode where you get a little backstory of him and Gemma's relationship, that's amazing stuff right there. So all, if if you like heady sci-fi with a lot of big concepts, big ideas, if you like outstanding performances, technical, like just technical marvel of a show in terms of the way it's shot, the way that, like, hey, you got to pay attention to every little detail because you never know when it's going to come back at some point. This is definitely a show where, and to me also a show like this is why you get Apple TV Plus, is because this this show I don't think would be on any other streaming service, but more importantly, I don't think that a show would be as popular, because I think that I hate to say this, if this was on Netflix, it would be dumbed down a
Oh,
little
it
bit.
would have been canceled for season one.
Probably because it probably
Mm.
wouldn't have gotten the numbers that Netflix needs in order for it to remain sustainable.
It,
Or season two would be a movie, a 3 hour movie that they would just have on that would explain everything, and then you just, after it, you're just like, what is this? What happened?
and also, side note, if you enjoy music, great show for it as well. Ben Stiller always does a phenomenal job in any of his productions when it comes to music and tying it in properly
Hmm.
to a show. I just want to throw that out there. We didn't really talk about the music of the show,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'd say go enjoy it.
Well, Chris, thank you very much for this deep dive into Severance season two. So greatly appreciate your insight. Always love getting to chat with you about, if you haven't caught our Creature Commando talk, I really enjoyed that as well. So let us know again where the people can find you, and do you have anything that you'd like to plug?
Sure. So best place to find me is like I'm one of the co-hosts for Movie Smash. So movie-smash.com. You can always find us on any whatever you listen to your podcast on, we're probably on it. I think it's like
Mhm.
20 or 30 services by this point. We release every other Tuesday. And we're always picking a movie that's based upon a comic or a graphic novel outside the MCU. Not because we hate the MCU, just because we think everyone's already talking about them, and we want
Mhm.
to talk about something else. So we always like to find some gems there. And as well as I'm also the founder of Off Panel Creations. We're always building some piece of nerdy furniture. So you want to check us out over there too. We're on all the socials. So we will come find us, I guess, the best way of putting it.
Yep, I will have all of that in the episode notes, and make sure to properly tag people because I think for the Creature Commandos, I wasn't properly tagging people. Now I figured all that out because I'm now old and I can't figure out social media anymore. So that really bums me out. But hey, uh, I appreciate the conversation. Looking forward to you sent me a list of a bunch of shows potentially to talk about. Looking forward to talking about a lot of those as well.
Awesome.